How's it going, guys? John here. This is the Basic Expert channel, and I wanted to make this video. This is third or fourth? I think it's the third video in my Basic Fantasy series, talking about Basic Fantasy RPG, how I'm running it, and just kind of going over the rules. I'm going to take a different format with this one. I was trying to be all professional and make slideshows, and I'm just giving myself extra work, especially when the PDF for Basic Fantasy is free, and I can just share that on my screen here rather than spend extra time looking at the PDF or at my rulebook and importing it into a slideshow. The slideshow looks nice, but I mean the rulebook's free here, so we're going to go over a few things today. We're going to go over travel, wilderness travel. We're going to go over waterborne travel, and we'll talk a little bit about retainers and mercenaries and other sorts of things. And these are all things that, for me, as someone who came from more new school mode of play, they're just things that were not considered. I mean, we've already gone over a lot of stuff that was just not considered by me, or what I feel is how the hobby of pen and paper role-playing games is presented, in that you know, the equipment and their uses, the deadliness, the way the classes function, the squishiness of certain classes. If you're looking at the rules, Cyclopedia, race as class, obviously Basic Fantasy doesn't have that. The lack of the difference of the way classes play too. You know, we looked at like the thieves skill chart and how that is just so different from many other modern editions of how, for instance, in 5e, how the rogue works, which I kind of get annoyed that they changed it from the thief to the rogue. Like, I don't like that idea. Like, you're a thief, you steal things. It's okay. But I think that's part of the dumbing it down and making it a little more socially accessible kind of thing. But yeah, today we're going over wilderness adventures. So I'm going to switch screens here, and this is on page of the PDF 42. If you're looking in the physical book, it's 38. They are not aligned properly. And you know, before we get too far into that, we need to go back to the equipment phase. I kind of glossed over vehicles because we were getting to this point here where we have various kinds of land transportation, and you see in parentheses here, this is like its turning or like about face movement. And I don't use this, I should say, for regular characters as they are going through the dungeon. I think it can add some flavor, but it's just one more thing to keep track of, so I don't use it just because it doesn't seem necessary. And the rulebook here even specifies later in the encounter section that the maneuverability score, which is this score in parentheses, which is what the amount of movement it sucks up as an object turns. It can add something to the tactical nature of it. Later in the rulebook, it specifies, and we'll get to this eventually in the encounter section, that if it's not listed, just assume it's 5. And it can add some tacticalness to it, but it's just one extra thing to add, and so I just ignore it. And the rules allow you to do this because the rulebook in Basic Fantasy specifies that this is an optional rule. However, I would suggest using these values and these rules for things like horses, boats, chariots. These very large things have lots of mass that are going to be moving and turning something around. Like, it can't turn around on a dime the way like a human can running through a dungeon, right? Like, if you're running through a dungeon and you take a turn, you're able to maneuver a much tighter corner than a horse pulling a chariot is. So I would recommend using these rules for maneuverability, and what these rules are here in regards to these transportation vehicles in your game. Just to add a little bit more realism and strategic choice in that regard. Because once you're in that realm of piloting a ship or maneuvering a barge or raft down a river, you might want to incorporate this. So I have two PDFs open here, so let's go through here. You have for wilderness movement rates when traveling in the wilderness are related directly to encounter movement rates as shown on the table below. So you have, this is your encounter speed here on this column, and this, most characters are at 40, and then things like armor and other kinds of restrictions might decrease your speed of movement. And the amount of speed that you have in an encounter dictates how far you can move in the wilderness, or your miles per day. This is where I think D&D gets a lot, modern D&D, I think in the DMG, I don't remember what page, but talks about how players can generally move 24 miles a day. If they're traveling like 8 hours a day, right here, movement rates shown on the table above are figured based on 8-hour day of travel through open, clear terrain. The terrain type will alter the rate somewhat, as shown on this table below. So these are just like you're on a road, open, flat land. No obstacles, no trees or forests, no broken bridges. Nothing is going to get in the character's way of moving at this rate. So relatively safe, even level travel. And you have these modifiers here. So this is all good stuff to me. If you're using a hex crawl kind of map, if you're using a map of the wilderness and you're doing a hex crawl, or you can do it with just regular graph paper as well. I've seen people do that as well. You're going to want to use these, I believe, and I think it will add some extra flavor, because while you're doing all this, and we'll get to it in the encounter section, I believe, later, you're going to be checking for random encounters as they move through the wilderness. And what are those encounters going to be? Is it going to be friendly merchants? Is it going to be another NPC adventuring party? Maybe they're rivals. I like the idea of the adventuring party having rivals that they can compete against. Maybe run into in the dungeon, ally with every once in a while when it matters. Those sorts of things. But you're going to want to use these statistics here. So if you're moving through a jungle, you're going to multiply it by 1/3. You're going to multiply it by 2/3 for desert, forest, or hills. Clear, it's times 1. So just as it's specified here, this is what it's probably going to be. And then obviously if you're on a well-paved like road where it stretches for miles, it's even, it's easy for you to walk on or for a cart to move on, you're going to actually increase the rate of travel that you're going to have right here by 1/3. So you're going to multiply it by 1 and 1/3. You can do a forced march traveling 12 hours per day. If this is done, add an additional 50% to the distance traveled. Each day of forced march performed after the first inflicts 1d6 damage on the characters and their animals, if any. A save versus death ray with constitution bonus applied is allowed to avoid this damage, but after this save is failed, once it is not rolled again, and the character or creature, for that character or creature, a day spent resting restarts the progression. And the way I ruled it is like you could march yourself to exhaustion if you wanted to, but it wasn't going to necessarily kill you. Now, that's just my own personal homebrew rule. It doesn't really explicitly say here what happens to you if this 1d6 depletes you to 0. But I just see it as a sort of like you're just walking until you pass out from exhaustion. And if you get into combat, obviously, and you get dropped to 0, that's probably enough to kill you because you're exhausted, and any kind of combat encounter, you're not going to be at your tip-top shape in regards to that. You also have these rules here for traveling by boat. Maybe you want to run a pirate adventure or allow the players to sail across an ocean or sea to another part of the continent. All these other sorts of things are potentially possible, and to have seafaring adventures in that regard as well. You're going to need, again, the vehicle section, which shows you your water transportation, how big, how heavy, how much cargo it can carry. the amount of crew you need for that boat, and its movement rate. So, this can move 30 feet. So if we look at our rule here, it can go 18 miles in a day. And then you're going to roll for wind direction and which way is the wind going. And it's going to be affected by the sailing and or tacking of which direction they're going and how strong that breeze is. So they might not be able to move at all if they have a strong gale, or if they're tacking against a very light breeze or becalmed. And you got explanations for this all down here. And you got some rules for traveling by air. When traveling by air, overland movement rates are doubled and all terrain effects are ignored. Most winged creatures must maintain at least 1/3 normal forward movement in order to remain airborne. Otherwise, devices such as flying carpets generally do not have this limitation. So, and then you got rules for becoming lost. I think this is really useful stuff for, especially if they go off the beaten trail. I generally don't do the becoming lost thing. Like, if the players are traveling from city to city and they're sticking to a paved road or to a pretty well used thoroughfare where it's very clear which way the path is going. But it says adventurers following roads, trails, rivers, streams, or other obvious landmarks are unlikely to become lost. Again, that's how I rule it. However, when the party strikes out into trackless forests, windblown desert, etc., they may become lost. Secretly roll a save versus death rate, adjusted by the wisdom of the party leader, i.e. whichever player character seems to be leading. Alternately, an ability roll against wisdom may be rolled, if that optional rule is in use. The GM must determine the effect of a failed roll. So, the moment they press out into the wilderness, there's a chance that they may become lost. And I think that can create for some interesting sort of sandboxy kind of adventure. I know that in my old school days of, not old school days, but when I first started to play, I didn't really play with this rule of becoming lost, and the players would just instantly got to wherever they wanted to go without problem, without issue. And I don't particularly like that kind of gameplay, really. I think it doesn't really do it for me. Just getting to where you need to be, getting lost in the random encounters along the way, I think can help fuel the kind of adventure that a lot of players are going to experience. And it's exciting for me as the game master as well, because the world is sort of unfolding in front of me. It's not just like, oh good, the players are following the script. I'm as surprised and excited to discover the world along with the players. So then we get to these rules regarding retainers, specialists, and mercenaries. And this is something that my players use a lot of, and it can become a very useful tool, especially when, for instance, one of the first times my players used retainers or followers was when they needed to clear out a bandit lair. There's only 3 players in this party for this basic fantasy game I'm running, and there was a whole bandit lair full of 20 to 30, who knows how many bandits in there. So they were able to, each of them, rally a certain amount of followers, which I think equated to about like 10 villagers with very basic equipment that were willing to follow them because they were tired of the bandits harassing their supply chains. Now, for the situation regarding my players in hiring essentially townsfolk, I didn't exactly follow these rules because it was to a degree I did. They were in the tavern, and the dwarf character was, I believe, buying drinks for, one of the characters was buying drinks for everyone in the tavern. Like, it was in the evening, everyone's there drinking, having a good time. And so the player character buys a round of drinks for everyone, kind of, softens them up to the case that the characters are going to make. So one buys the drinks for everyone, everyone's feeling good. The other player stands up on the table and gives a rousing speech to try and rally as many people from the town as possible, offering them pay in coin because they had a patron who was willing to give them coin to help sort of form a posse or a group of a mob essentially to go and take out these bandits, because their brother and it was this like, you know, spinster sort of widowed woman, her brother and her niece and nephew and sister-in-law were all captured by these bandits, and so she was wealthy and she wanted to sort of hire for that. So players had the money. I did it more as a social thing rather than because money wasn't an issue here, and it was sort of a different situation where bandits are plaguing this town, and can the players sort of rally any of the men in the town to join them in eradicating this bandit problem that they're having. And but the rules as written within Basic Fantasy say the following. Retainers are hired for a share of treasure, so you have to give your retainers at least 15%. And these are different than regular NPCs. So I guess what I would say is, as I had them hire just regular non-player characters. Retainers are people like you're hiring them to travel with you all the time. You're hiring a squire. You're hiring just a man-at-arms to be pretty much an extra party member in the party. And this is something that back in the day was very common with a lot of old school D&D. As the hobby has modernized, as the game has modernized, it seems like this concept of retainers and followers has sort of gone to the wayside, or it's shifted to, like, instead of having many different NPCs or retainers following you, you maybe have like the party maybe has like one that follows. And the issue I have with that is that it kind of becomes, depending on how you run it, it could become a dungeon master player character, which is a big kind of no sin in my opinion, kind of problematic. So I try not to go that route. Instead, I like this idea of retainers. And if we look at the rules cyclopedia, as I was saying, if we look at the rules cyclopedia and we go to page 10, we have a chart here for charisma, the charisma adjustment table. And so if you have a score of 3, you have a reaction adjustment of -3, which is essentially just your ability score modifier. Number of max retainers that you can have, 1, and that retainer has a morale of 4. So if in combat, the dungeon master needs to call for a morale check, they got a very low morale, there's a high chance that if you have a very low charisma, that one retainer is going to flee. And this, so the reaction roll adjustment and the number of retainers that an individual can have kind of go up from a score of 3 and above. So 4 to 5, you have an adjustment of -2, max number of retainers 2, and morale is now 5. 6 to 8 is -1 for adjustment, number of retainers is 3, and they have a morale of 6. 9 to 12 is no adjustment, and so you're just rolling, you know, your reaction rolls as is. And you can have a max number of 4 with retainer morale of 7, and it just goes up by 1 up until 18. So at like 18, you have a +3 reaction roll. You have the max number of retainers being 7, and retainer morale being 10, which is pretty high. And you're giving each retainer 15% of the gold that you earn. Here, where did we go? Here we go. You're giving them 50% of the armor, rations, basic equipment. You're providing them pretty much paying for everything for this person. So that's why they get kind of the lower share of the treasure. To hire a retainer, you have to sometimes maybe get a town crier, make postings, or maybe like what my players did, go to the tavern and make an announcement, see if anyone's interested. You just have to do something in public places. Hiring a crier can be kind of costly. I don't think it goes into it. I believe the rules cyclopedia gets into it, what the cost is, but I don't know if I don't recall that Basic Fantasy gets to the nitty gritty of hiring a town crier. You could have NPCs such as innkeepers or taverners to direct potential retainers to your character, and it's up to you as the game master to decide what's to be done. If the characters are successful, one or more NPCs will present themselves to be interviewed. The game master should play out the interview, and after that interview is played out, the game master rolls 2d6 and adds the player character's charisma bonus plus any other modifiers that due to the interview may have come about. Maybe the player character offered them more than 15% of the share of treasure, which means, you know, maybe they'll be more favorable to accepting the offer of employment that the player character is offering them. So right here, like, it gives you that option: a bonus of +1 for a higher than average pay, or the offer of magic items such as a sword +1, or a penalty if the player character offers poor terms. The roll is read as follows. So then you roll 2d6, you add all these modifiers. 2 or less, you have refusal. 3 to 5, refusal, they don't want to work for you. 6 to 8, try again, continue negotiations. 9 to 11, they accept. And 12 or more, acceptance +1 to loyalty. So loyalty here, let's talk about that. All retainers have a loyalty score, which is generally 7 plus the employer's charisma bonus or penalty. The loyalty score is used just as morale score for monsters or mercenaries. Let's go again here to page 10 of the rules cyclopedia, because I'm curious, mathematically speaking, if that is what is going on here. So yeah, 7. Yeah, it's the same as the rules cyclopedia for the way morale works in there. So let's say you roll a 12 and you have a charisma score of 9, which means 7. There's no modifier there, but let's say that you rolled a 12 on that reaction roll. You offered them very favorable terms and offered them a magic item. You got 12 or more on that reaction roll. They're, instead of having a morale of 7, they're gonna have a morale of 8 when adventuring with you, which is pretty cool. So, and it says, in addition, the game master should roll a loyalty check for each retainer at the end of each adventure after treasure is divided to determine if the retainer will remain with the player character. The GM may apply adjustments to this roll, probably no more than 2 points, plus or minus, if the retainer is particularly well or poorly paid, or poorly taken care of. So here's the thing: a lot of players might feel the desire to use retainers as meat shields, which to a degree that's kind of what they're there for, but you're also trying to kind of simulate a world, and you're trying to play these NPCs as real people. So my suggestion is, if that occurs, if the party is abusive to maybe they hire a group of 5 retainers total, and the players don't treat their retainers very well. One dies in an adventure. Maybe there's a penalty, and they die in that retainer died in that adventure because the players made them like step on a pit trap to see if it was a trap or not. You might want to roll to have that adventure, after that adventure, that loyalty check, you might want to add a negative modifier to that roll, just to put in the fact that, like, maybe these retainers are like, you know what, you're not the best employer, we don't really want to work with you. So what's the level of well, maximum number of retainers? I'm going to use rules cyclopedia rules, but a player character may hire at most 4 retainers, adjusted by the character's charisma or penalty, bonus or penalty. So I'm assuming that if the math for loyalty matches up to the rules cyclopedia to BECME, this will match up as well. Any attempts to hire more than this number of retainers will be met with automatic refusals. Level of retainers: normally potential retainers will be 1/2 the level of the employer or less. So a first level character cannot hire retainers. Second level cannot hire retainers. Second level PCs can only hire first level characters, and so on. Of course, there is no way for the retainers to directly know the level of the PC, employer, nor the employer to know the level of the potential retainer, but the game master should usually enforce this rule for purposes of game balance. It shouldn't be surprising that first level characters can't hire retainers, as they have no reputation to speak of. I mean, it kind of gives you some play here to kind of go back and forth with how you want to play that off and what you exactly want to give your players, but to me it makes sense that they should at least be of the same level or below. I don't know why, unless the players have a lot of money, I don't know why a higher level NPC would want to be employed by lower level ones. Again, unless the players are somehow loaded and are able to pay and motivate this high level NPC to stay with them. But it might be harder to keep a higher level NPC around. They might get more expensive as they realize they have maybe a bargaining position. So you can hire specialist NPCs as well. They may be hired by a player characters to perform various tasks. Specialists do not go on adventures or otherwise risk their lives fighting monsters, disarming traps, or any other dangerous things player characters and retainers may do. Rather, specialists perform services the player characters usually can't perform for themselves, like designing and erecting castles, training animals, or operating ships. And you can get things like an alchemist. It gives them their pay. For instance, the alchemist is 1,000 gold pieces per month. Animal trainer, armor, weaponsmith, engineer. You're going to need this later when they start building fortresses and strongholds. Savants, ship's crew. So obviously, if the player characters do not have the skills, which my player characters don't, to pilot a ship, probably going to need to hire a crew. So and this is special. You got a chart down here as to what their cost is. We also have mercenaries. These are hired warriors, generally hired in units or small platoons, 32 to 48 fighters divided into 2 or 4 squads. Soldiers. Each squad is led by a corporal, while the platoon is led by a lieutenant plus a sergeant. Platoons are joined together into companies, each generally consisting of 2 to 5 platoons, led by a captain with a sergeant as an assistant, called a first sergeant. So mercenaries are a little different than retainers in that mercenaries are used for military engagement. I think we're going to go over the war machine and the rules cyclopedia a little later, but you could potentially use this for the hiring of military campaign troops for your players, and then use the war machine rules in the rules cyclopedia for how that plays out as far as mass combat is concerned. Mercenaries will virtually never go into a dungeon, so you see this number here, like, oh no, 32 to 48 fighters. They're not going in. They're generally not going in the dungeon. They're there to fight battles on the battlefield, not for clearing out dungeons. Mercenaries are housed in a player character stronghold, so you're gonna you need a place to keep them, and require 200 square feet each, but cost 25% less per month, as this is covered by their room and board. Elven mercenaries, however, require 500 square feet of space each in order to reduce their pay as they demand better living conditions. See the stronghold section for details, and you have statistics here. These are all assumed to be level 1, and if you wanted to have them be of higher level, it says to multiply the cost by the level of that character. These are in gold pieces here, and you see the equipment that such characters would have. Let's go into character advancement and talk about experience points. So this is where it's interesting. Experience points are given for monsters defeated and for other challenges as the GM sees fit. The following table provides XP values for monsters. Where a monster has both a character level and hit dice given, use the larger value as the monster's level. Non-combat challenges may be assigned a level, or a flat XP value assigned as the GM wishes. I also just do gold, as 1 gold piece equals 1 experience point, because when they're delving into these dungeons, there's oftentimes a lot of treasure in there, and so that's what treasure is used for building strongholds, hiring retainers, hiring foot soldiers, all these other sorts of things that, like, honestly in modern 5th edition D&D are kind of just missing. So this is kind of handy here, or if you want to make your own monsters, you can see what that monster's hit. If you were to make your own custom monster and you're like, I want it to have 8 hit dice, you know that it has this value of XP, and if it has a special ability bonus, it's this extra bonus here. So it's a good little, I've used this before when I've tried, for instance, to take things from the Fiend Folio and kind of port them over into basic fantasy. I've been able to use this chart here as a way to figure out what is, and again, special ability bonus is listed by a little asterisk next to the hit dice of monsters and creatures that the characters may fight. NPCs should be treated as monsters for a number of hit dice equivalent to the character's level. Add special ability bonus for clerics, blah blah blah. After tallying the XP earned in a given adventure, the amount should be divided by the number of adventures, and as described above, each retainer should receive a 1/2 share. So a group with 4 player characters and a retainer is counted as having 4 and 1/2 members. If 2000 XP are earned by the group, the share is 440 XP, and the retainer receives 222. So this is the balancing out of having retainers that are helping you clear out a dungeon. It might seem like, wow, I can, the player character, one player character with a charisma of 18 might have 7, retainers following them into a dungeon potentially if they're wealthy enough to do that. Well, it's balanced out by the fact that they're going to have to share that experience, the experience points from monsters, gold, and treasure with this retainer. That is also part of the cost of having it. Whereas if they went in with only 1 or 2, they themselves would get more experience points, level up faster, but obviously it's a little more dangerous as well. So that is that. And at that point, we come to the encounter, which we will save for a different video. I want to direct you guys. I want to direct you guys to my subscribe star. Check that out. I have adventure number 2 up and for April, and I am working on Maze, which is going to, I think, be a 2-level dungeon with some interesting monsters in it, hopefully. I'm trying to get better at my adventure writing, and so this is just a way for me to make it so that if you want to support my YouTube channel and what I'm doing, that you get something in return, which is a supplement a month, pretty much. An adventure. I might do other kinds of supplements. It might not be an adventure every single time, but you're going to get something a month. And on top of that, if you support at $3 to $5, I'll generally, when I release a new product that I'm trying to sell as a PDF, you'll probably get it for free based on what it is. The $3 might not get it every time, but the $5 definitely will. So for instance, my dungeon generator, which I've been working on, nearing completion, which uses a dungeon generator and geomorphs. That one will be probably for $5 supporters. You'll get it for free, along with everything else that you get. So if you're interested in supporting my channel and helping me out with that, check that out. Only have 2 subscribers right now, but I am very grateful for those that do that. And I also have links on my YouTube channel, and they'll be in the video description, to my Gilded server, which is an awesome place. We sit and talk about games, the hobby. We gripe about some things too. There's a whole RPG gripe section, but we generally have a good time, and people are starting to try and organize games in there. I want to try and organize some games in there, so please join in and check that out. Get involved. Gilded is a Discord alternative with a better terms of service, so I'm rather happy with that. But I think that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope that I've piqued your interest in basic fantasy and going over these rules. Again, my whole point with this is that I've come from 5e, and I don't really like the direction 5e has gone. And I know that there's got to be other people that come from new school that are like me that wanted to play D&D for adventure, and maybe 5e is not giving it to you, or maybe you're starting to see the cracks in the system that maybe you don't like. And because of that, I'm highlighting this game because it's free. The PDFs are free and the books are printed at cost. And so to me, it just seems like one of the easiest alternatives that someone could use to get into. And it's going to be an easy pitch to a group too, because again, the PDFs are free and the books are printed at cost. You could outfit an entire table with the rule books, the basic core rule book of basic fantasy, for the cost of a single rulebook of the 5e like Dungeon Master's Guide or Player's Handbook. So it is definitely more cost effective of a game, and in my opinion, a better designed one than 5e. I really love it. That's why I'm talking about it. So until the next video, we're going to go over the encounter section. We're going to talk about combat a little bit, all kinds of stuff like that. Stay tuned for next Monday. If you're watching this on, let's see, what is... I'm recording this on the 6th, but this will release on Monday the 11th. If you're watching this on Monday the 11th, in the evening tonight at 8:15, I will be doing a live stream again. They're pretty fun. I've done 2 already. Generally, we just hang out. I usually do some art, and we chat about games and the subject of all that stuff involved, and just generally have a good time. Last time, Scrying Dutchman was on, as well as my buddy Brendan, who is the one who got me into OSRs and is a player in the basic fantasy campaign that I'm running. So I don't know if those people will be in again next week, but we generally have a good time either in chat or on the stream itself talking about role-playing games, nerd stuff. Last time we talked for a long time about David Lynch and tabletop role-playing games and Dune and all kinds of stuff. So make sure you check that out tonight, 8:15 Mountain Standard Time. Until the next video, guys, talk to you later. Peace out.